Dude, I am excellent. Long time.
Yes, man. Many years.
Yeah, way too long. Way too long, man. Sorry it's taken me this long to come back around. I guess we'll just dive into it. Dude, I just got stoked. I saw something you had posted and it was two things that wanted to make me reach back out. One was you were talking about the runner's high, and that essentially that's something that has been misconceived as being one thing that we'll dive into. And what I really liked mostly was that you went back and said, we've been wrong on this.
Yeah. It's
And I
science,
think
brother.
I think in today's climate, we don't do that very much. And again, that was like, an actual person who's researching for the sake of knowledge, not agenda. So thank you for one. And so I hope things are well. I hope the last couple years of weirdness has been okay. I'm sure we'll catch up a bit, but here we are.
Yep. Yeah, man. I'm pumped. So however you want to get started, dude, let's go. Let's roll.
Cool. Yeah, so let's just dive into that one. That was really the first thing I thought, man. And since kind of my focus right now, I guess we haven't caught up in a bit, but with the podcast and things like that, I'm really interested in performance enhancement, basically across the board at this point. And I'm not really interested in what the barrier between me and that is. And so interested to find out what I can and try whatever that means for me. So the running high thing, I really liked that, and I wanted to let you go ahead and explain what you guys found out.
Yeah. So first of all, it's not our work, right? It's just it's somebody else. I forgot the name of the author and what lab it came out of, but that distinction is important for scientists. Most folks don't care, but credit where credit should go there.
Absolutely.
So to back up a little bit there, most folks have heard of runner's high, right? And this is feeling of euphoria that comes not every time you run, and typically something that happens during a moderate to fairly long session. So you're not going to get this with a mild jog or anything like that. And it's a very pronounced state. And if you've ever had it, you've had it and you know it. And if you haven't and you're not sure, you probably haven't had it. So we're probably talking about, at least an hour plus or something. I mean, it's different for everyone. So this is a fairly extended thing, and it's not specific to running, although that's where it's the most pronounced, and that is where it is the most scientifically documented. So the runner's high itself is very well scientifically documented. It is a feeling of euphoria or freedom. It's not necessarily the same as being in the zone or in flow, but it is quite different. And for many years, that's been explained, or at least hypothesized to be a result of endogenous morphine. And so most folks think of that as endorphins. And so if you Google around anything, you say runner's high is explained by the release of endorphins. And again, what that means is endogenous morphine. And so these are opioids that come out of your own system that have the exact effect that you would have if you take morphine or these other things. Again, you would hear euphoria and just complete bliss and joy and this type of stuff. You lose yourself often. You can't believe how far you've made it. Fatigue kind of just goes away, and you're just in autopilot, sort of floating through the world a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely had it in the, not that I'm a runner by any stretch, but I dabbled for a little bit last year and for sure was able to find that. And I would have thought everything made sense that I'd ever always heard. This is the endorphins and things like that that are being released.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I'm like, totally makes sense. The explanation would match symptoms. We know that if you take this stuff exogenously, like totally makes sense, right? But I guess more recent work, actually, a number of papers now have shown, I think, fairly clear evidence that it's not the endorphins. Endocannabinoid system is probably more responsible for it, which is very interesting, of course. I've never had so many weed heads jump on my
Oh,
little
God
post
damn it.
before.
Oh, that's just me. That's the problem then.
Yeah, yeah, it's like I've had so many people like, I told you, hemp, CBD. Like, we're like, all right, well,
Oh, back down.
a little bit. I can't speak to whether or not I don't have much of history, really any, with marijuana or THC specifically. Some CBD, plenty of CBD, but so I don't know if it's the same feeling or not as when you're just high. My guess is it's probably not.
um,
Quite a feeling.
I don't find them the same.
I
If
think that's
that helps.
I think that's what most folks would probably say.
Yeah,
So
both are
interesting
good.
stuff.
Yeah, both are good, but very different.
That's what I would assume. Yeah. So I mean, what's the take home here? I mean, absolutely nothing at this point. But it is interesting. And one of the things that you led with is I think one of the more interesting things about science, and one of the things that's kept me being a scientist for all these years, is I actually just just love it when we get things totally wrong like that. And in this case, it's pretty benign and it's somewhat irrelevant to direct application now, although it has tremendous relevance moving forward, especially with the development of pharmacologicals and just our simple understanding of a handful of things, pain, and one which is still very maligned and very misunderstood. And then in general, just what are feelings that are caused these altered states of consciousness. So crossing that barrier is incredibly intriguing. We have to make these steps to make those steps. And so it does have, in my opinion, very significant implications down the road, but it doesn't change your training or what your nutrition or I don't think you can take a small puff and then head out and get into this feeling of flow faster. I don't think those are the implications now. But I've always loved when we get things like that I know that I've spouted off in my classroom 1,000 times.
Sure.
And
And
it's like, shit,
well,
we're wrong.
yep. Well, I mean, how many people still fight the ice after surgery thing? This is something that's been proven and researched and studied time and time again, yet it doesn't seem like it has trickled into actual practice within the medical field for some reason. Why is that dogma so hard to be broken?
Well, this is actually true of a number of things. Pick your flavor, right? I could do
Sure.
this with 1,000 different topics. I don't think it's the worst thing, to be honest. It's sort of frustrating to the end user. But for my sake, from behind the scenes, I'm not against it entirely. And the reason is you have to be very careful of walking a fine line. So being on the cutting edge also means you're getting cut a lot.
That's
And
yep.
so you do want the institutions being more conservative. That is important. You want the individuals being more having a higher risk tolerance, but you want the institutions being conservative. So when you don't know anything about it and you don't know where your personal risk tolerances are, you don't want to be with somebody who has a very high risk tolerance. You don't, and now all of a sudden you're being misled and you think it's very safe. We want to know the most ultra conservative is over here. And if I want to do that, I can always lean back on that. And I'll follow the RDA guidelines. I'll follow the AMA and American Heart Association. I'll follow those guidelines. And it's going to be very, very safe. Now, is it the most individually effective? Definitely not. But that's not the point. They want to set you a foundation of safety, basically.
Gotcha.
That's coming at the cost of effectiveness. No question about it. But I think it's just a misunderstanding of what those things are supposed to do. Now, part of it is their fault for actually espousing themselves as like, if you do anything besides us, you're pseudoscience or whatever. Like that is a massive problem on their end, is why they've lost so much faith, and they have earned that loss, no question about it. Especially in the last couple of years, just
Yikes.
like overwhelming failures of leadership there. So I think it's actually okay. I'm fine with it just taking a long time for things to
Slowly adapt and change.
yeah. And the last piece I want to say on that is you have to remember what we're asking professors and physicians and people in the medical field, nurses, to do when it comes to knowledge is it's unprecedented. And so in this particular example, just one of the things I do basically every day is read research. Like it's just a part of my ethos, right? Like this is part of my function. And I still miss thousands of things. Like for example, the study that was published a few weeks ago that we're talking about, the runner's high, there's actually been a number of these studies, and I hadn't seen any of them going back many, many, many years, like over a decade. So I've missed this for 10 years.
Right. This isn't new information.
No, this wasn't groundbreaking. It was groundbreaking to me. And there was a new study that came out in Science, which is an extremely highly reputable journal. And it showed more mechanistic stuff, and it had removal of organs to demonstrate mechanism. And so that's what caught my attention. But then looking back, you're like, oh, this has actually been demonstrated and at least thought to be occurring for a long time. So you just miss it. There's just no way where there's so much information and so much knowledge. Asking someone like me to be totally on the ball with everything, it's just not going to happen. And then you transfer that one step further to somebody like a physician who spends most of their days working with people. They're reading like a paper a week, maybe.
Right. And they're
So
not
there's
just
just
focusing on ice anymore. This is a little bit of like the athletes that are trying to get back to play.
Yeah.
and are on the gas, like they're in the know anyway, just for an example of something like this. And so your average total knee replacement candidate who's going to be sitting on the couch a lot afterwards, this isn't damaging them.
Totally.
And that's a really valid point. I haven't looked at it like that. And it's easy to be like, why can't we get this right? Meanwhile, like, they're
Yeah.
fucking busy and there's other important things they need to learn about instead of whether ice is as useful as it could be. It's not like people are dying from it.
Totally. And the other thing to think about is like, what would you rather that physician spend their time doing? Taking on another person, getting another person in,
Right.
or like going to a conference where they're learning more about updated surgery techniques, anesthetic techniques, cleansing techniques, or like whether you should throw the ice pick. Like it probably doesn't really fucking matter,
Right.
to
It
be
really
honest.
probably
Like
doesn't matter.
for athletes
Talking about some
too.
pretty tiny percentage differences if we're really going to make an honest discussion about it.
Totally. And it's like, okay, they'll quickly glance at the science and they're just like, it seems to be maybe not the most effective thing, but again, very little harm if you, okay, like we're just not fine, do whatever you want, but we're focusing on well, in this example, like how about the fact that we probably have done way too many knee replacement surgeries? We have
Yep.
not looked at alternative therapies. Like this is where I want them, knee surgeons, to be paying attention to is, are there better methods that, because if you look at things like orthopedics, the outcomes are terrible. I mean, they're
Right.
just awful. Like people would be shocked of like generally surgery is, in fact, like I've been saying this for a long time. In 20 years, or pick your number, we're going to look back at a tremendous amount of just global surgeries and be like, holy shit, I can't believe they cut people open and did that to them.
Which is the same way we look
Nonsense.
back 50 years now.
100%. So I want the surgeons to be focused on that stuff. And like, we'll let the PTs and the other communities push
Work
the
on rehab.
ice. Totally. So,
Right. Yeah, very, very valid. Now, something you'd said about there being a difference between the flow state and the runner's high. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because flow state being something I'm really trying to spend as much of my time possible in.
yeah. And I guess the distinction here is not the physical or psychological representation. It is the action of induction. So what I mean is the only way we know of to get into runner's high is sustained continuous physical output.
Right.
That's not the only way we know how to get into flow.
That's true.
So that's our distinction here. There are ways, breath work. There are just simply being focused on work can induce that. Being in nature, being in life-threatening situations. Many things can put you in that same end place. It's just a matter of, you don't have to go run for this. Although, like you and I are in the same boat with that. It's like, that's generally my favorite way to get into flow or flow-like states is through physical exertion, but it's not the only way.
But with, I guess, as far as the brain goes, with the chemical release, what's the big difference there between flow state, or is that measurable?
It's not really, because like here's a good example. We'd have said biologically that the runner's high is because of X molecule. In fact,
Right.
so
Right.
so we don't even know what the hell's causing it, let alone be able to say like, okay, which one is specifically responsible. The most likely scenario is it's multifactorial.
And most
This is
likely there's some psychological response too.
well, so here's the difference when you bring in a psychologist or when you bring in a physiologist like me. I'm going to give everything the rationale of it's just physiology.
Sure.
And I'm going to be like, well, yeah, but like you got there because some chemical touched something.
Right.
I don't give a shit what, like, if you're not in the right psychological state, all you're actually doing is then altering biology. So it's really just biology. That's all there is here, which is probably an unfair position.
But which I also like that, right? Because then that actually means that you're in control of the machine. That you're trying to rely on less fucking magic.
Yeah.
To get to one state to the other. If you're like, yo, if I can find the buttons and controls, even better.
Yeah. Well, what we always say, what I always say is there are only two sciences in the world. There's chemistry and mathematics. And chemistry is just math. So like that's it. Like everything is explainable. There's no randomness. That's a certain philosophical stance that ones could argue, but when it comes to biology, we're going to say that, man, it's just math. Math alters how chemicals work. Chemicals alter their. Of course, the canyon we're missing here is the leap from the hard problem of consciousness and the soft problem of consciousness. We haven't broached that gap yet, of course, but until then, we're still going to say it's all just math and chemistry.
So, are you actively trying to study more consciousness work as well?
No, that's pretty far outside of our scope. Although obviously I have a keen personal interest in that area. It's not something we do in
Gotcha,
our lab.
gotcha. Um, I was curious about this. Are you still at Cal State Fullerton? Are you
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
How competitive is it trying to get grant money and have resources to do
Oh,
studies?
no. It's a zero chance. Like it's just if you rounded the numbers, you would have a statistical 0% chance of getting federal funding for anything that we do. If you look at, so a couple things to understand. In general, you've got a few of the major institutions. NIH is what most people are familiar with. That's the National Institute of Health.
Mhm.
Under that umbrella, there are things like NIA, the National Institute of Aging. And then there are some other things like if you're in more of like chemistry, mathematics, there are NSF and different institutions you can go to. So that's federal funding. Um, the federal funding distributed to individuals under the age of 35 is less than 1%, which is massively different from when I was a kid. And when you and I were a kid, it used to be like 30%. So
Wow.
what happened is these folks that came in, they finished their PhDs and maybe did a postdoc, they started a lab, they're 30 years old, 32, 34 years old. You would have some ability to get some federal funding. And if your work turned into be interesting and effective and useful and you were a good researcher, then you could continue on. Well, these folks got this money in the 1980s. And then these 35-year-olds turned into 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds. And they just kept continuing to keep getting funding. And there was nothing left for the younger folks. So when I was a doctoral student, it was like you're looking at the numbers and you're like, you have a 0%, you're not going to get a federal grant if you're under 35, unless you are extremely lucky and connected to the right individuals.
So
Now
there is a
I
big
was.
political game to it.
I won't say it's political. It's not probably fair. It's not like they're sitting, but it is. Of course, there's some of that. It's just more of like, okay, we know this name. We know what lab they came from. Okay, good. They're doing the type of stuff that we value. All right, like, and you have, 300 people vying for the same money. You're going to pick the person. You're like, oh, that's came out of Vincent's lab. Oh yeah, okay, great. Yeah. So it's not like they're just like going against, be like, oh, we don't want to keep. We're going to big
No,
pharma shills here. It's
but
just
if they're
more of
going to
like,
give the money, they're trying to give it to somewhere that's going to have more credibility, more
yeah.
whatever it is
Yeah,
to go
so
with.
that has completely changed. You fold that on top of the fact that what we do is sport performance, and you're already like, okay, they don't,
Which is a
and
pretty low priority, I would say, for the federal government.
I actually think that's okay.
Sure, of course. Yeah, you're a rational, smart person. Yeah.
I want the National Institute of Health to be funding health, cancer, and pregnancy and aging. Like that's where their money should be going, not like how do I get this dude squat more.
Sure.
In fact, I'd be quite pissed if I was like, my tax dollars are going to fund sports, and I'm not even a sport fan. Like, I'd be furious. And then my mom just died of this preventable. I'd be furious. So
Yeah. Yeah,
we
that
have
had
no funding from the federal government like that. The second pillar you can get from is what we call industry.
Mhm.
And so then that is, in our world, this is an equipment company. This is just almost always a supplement company, or someone who can use the research and then kick a
help
profit off of paying
make
for it.
profit off of their thing. Gotcha.
Yeah, and so this is actually totally off topic, but this is one thing that I'll see circled around a lot of these like amateur scientists that are like worried about conflicts of interest and like, oh, this study was funded by blah blah blah. Like that has shit to do with conflict of interest. Nothing. If you think that you're going to throw a study out because it was funded by a company, then you better throw out basically the
Everything.
entire field, because no study is not funded. Like there
Especially
aren't
not
studies.
funded by a biased party at this point, right? Like of some sort.
Why would you pay for a study?
Right. I was just curious about this. Don't really have a whether the yes or no matters.
So there is some of that. There are benefactors, and we've been fortunate enough to have a few of those over our career where they just Renaissance periodization.
Yeah.
Renaissance periodization has given us a lot of money over the years, and literally cut us a check and said, "There's no don't even tell us what to do with it. They're like, do
No
whatever the
strings
hell you want,
attached.
zero strings attached. And like those are the only companies like that have kept us completely alive.
That's
And
incredible.
I mean, that's run dry for many years, but that's how people like us function. Is we just have to have benefactors who come in and be like, hey, here's $1,000 here, and then enough of those people come by, and then you get the occasional ones that will really dump a decent check in there, and you're like, okay, now we can do this next study. But that's how we survive.
What right now is your big focus or big study that you're stoked on that you guys are working on?
So we were extremely close to finishing our large clinical trial on intermittent fasting for hypertrophy.
Ooh.
We
So
were like
I've
for like
enjoyed intermittent fasting. This is something I've utilized and been works really really well for me probably for the last 5 or 6 years now.
yeah, we were like 3 weeks away from finishing a 3-year trial and got shut down with COVID.
Which
It's like
does that just toss all of it out?
it doesn't toss all of it out. It tossed the last, I would say, 35% out.
Any interesting conclusions you guys
We
that's even
can't.
worth sharing?
You don't even look at the data until it's all in,
Uh,
because then it's just bias and all
of
that stuff.
course, of course.
But what I can tease you on is here was the concept. This was really cool. This is a collaboration between myself and Menno Henselmans, if you know Menno.
Mm,
And Menno's good. Menno funded it. He was just
okay,
like, I don't have a thing. He's like, I have a foundation. We want to support science. Boom, let's fund this thing. And like he didn't have a product to sell out of it. I don't have a product to sell, whatever.
incredible.
The basic idea was, look, there's been a lot of trials, and my friend and collaborator Grant Tinsley has done a ton in intermittent fasting for weight loss and middle age things out of Texas and stuff. Well, he and I were just we were just shooting the shit at I think PaleoFX one day or something, just like one of these things. And I was like, man, but no one's ever looked at the ability to grow if you're fasting. Does it harm your ability to put on muscle? Because everyone's just worried about fat loss, but some people use intermittent fasting when they're trying to gain muscle. Does it hurt your ability? Does it not make a difference, or does it actually aid somehow? And we had some mechanistic reasons to think that there maybe it could lead in any three of these directions. The other thing I wanted to do, and my whole focus now, science moving forward, is I hate siloed research. And so typically what you're taught and the way that you're taught to do science is, in this particular example, we want to know whether or not intermittent fasting had any effect on ability to grow muscle, and people were actively training to grow muscle and eating to grow muscle. Great. So then the outcome measure we should go after is muscle growth. But I've worked with people. You've worked with actual humans. There is more to going into being a human than just, did I get this muscle change 10 weeks from now?
A little, a few other factors there. Some variables that are pretty tough to eliminate.
And if you've ever worked with somebody on their diet, you know that there are many things that come with food other than put it in your mouth, go train. And so we had the really comprehensive study where we had a sports psychologist on board. So we were asking them daily questions about satiety, happiness with your meal plan. We asked them daily questions about their digestion. We asked them, we took stool samples. We did the whole thing. We tracked energy expenditure. We tracked sleep. We tracked sleep quality. We tracked mood. We tracked all these things because I wanted to know, say, for example, it was maybe not as effective. Maybe it was 5% less effective at helping you add muscle. But 80% reduction in hunger pangs, 80% reduction in digestion, and like then we could go out and say, hey, look, here's what's happened. It may compromise a little bit of muscle growth, but it's probably going to improve your energy throughout the day and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
The
There
opposite,
could be
right?
a ton of positive benefits that maybe outweigh the slight decrease in this one aspect.
Or the opposite. It could say, hey, it's going to help you gain 25% muscle faster. But most people reported a lot of signs of being hungry all day. They hated it. It was hard to stick to. They got gas all day. Whatever the hell the thing is, right? I don't care how it landed on any side. Maybe it's just totally positive. Maybe it's all totally negative.
Yeah, just want to know.
And so we can tell people, hey, evidence-based, if you intermittent fast, because remember, here's the kicker. If you're trying to gain muscle mass, you can't do intermittent fasting at a maintenance or hypocaloric. This is different, right? So if you're trying to lose fat, intermittent fasting, it's easy because it's just like, well, I ate one less meal. Cool. But what happens when you eat excess calories and you do it in less meals?
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought as soon as you started talking about it. I was like, okay, so well, you have to keep people in a surplus, otherwise,
Yeah. So what
we're
happens
still
here
pretty
that,
aware that that's how either weight loss
yeah,
or weight gain happens. Is it seems to still be math, despite everyone would love there to be some other magic formula,
yeah,
including
because
myself, dude. You know,
sure. And
I'm the
this,
leanest I've been now, and I wanted for years there to be some other major factor to it than the shit I'm putting in my mouth, and here we are. It's all
yeah.
food.
Because in this particular case, too, remember, we matched both groups for calories, we matched them for carbohydrates, we matched them for protein. So now you're cutting out a meal opportunity or several meal opportunities, and you're still having to have, 200 grams of protein in a day.
Right.
Is that harder? Is it actually not that bad? Does it take a week to get used to, and then the next 2 months you're fine?
I guess depends on the person. 200 grams of
Yeah.
protein doesn't seem like a big stretch at the moment, but let
Well,
them.
yeah. So that's why we wanted to make sure that we have I think the true take home message out of that, not just like, yep, technically this will work in a lab setting if you don't consider any other variables, but you're going to shit yourself all day or you're going to,
Right.
whatever the case is. So, but yeah, man, we were in our last quarter of our cohort, and we had some people that were like days away, and then the rest were within a week or two finishing. And I begged like the president of the university. I was like, bro, can I have 3 more days?
Can they
Like,
just
can I
do it
get
at home?
3 more fucking days? But I had to biopsy them and do all this stuff.
Oh,
So,
right.
and we had to post test them and collect their poop again and all that. And it's just, it wasn't gonna fly.
I mean,
So,
so is basically research for you guys been on hold since?
not basically, it has been. We haven't done anything in 2 years.
Fuck.
It's
I mean,
California, my man.
oh,
You
that's
can't do
right.
shit.
That's right.
This is not Louisiana. It's not
No,
Florida.
and I'm in St. Louis now, my friend. I have adjusted.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, Missouri is probably pretty
yeah,
good.
I've had a bit of a life reset since I guess last time we got to hang out. Yep,
Well, I
moved to
feel
St.
like you're
Louis.
always in a van traveling somewhere
A
anyway.
bit.
So,
It may as well be. Just Chris Farley of the world living in a van down by the river doing motivational speeches in people's homes, smashing tables.
but you
Uh,
take awesome pictures, man. Your life looks
trying,
awesome.
man. Trying, man. It's been a real trip. Here's something I was curious about. So like if you were given the opportunity once now that things are kind of free, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to get back into doing what you do. Given the, whatever resource you wanted, what would you love to study without there being any hangups?
So the thing that I'm most interested in this point of my career is doing the type of human performance research that I just globally outlined, which is I want to do studies that take a more comprehensive approach to the human experience. Because in the last 2 years, while we haven't been collecting a lot of data, I've been coaching my dick off. I've been working with so many athletes, and we've basically made our entire approach mobile. And so we have an ability to run these complete comprehensive physiological testing batteries on individuals anywhere. And we've got kits to send out, we can do things and collect everything, send it back to us, and we can run the stuff on our end. And that has been so eye-opening because now when we're running these advanced diagnostics, right? So we're collecting everything that comes out of your body, we can collect. So your hair, stool, saliva, blood, sweat, all of it we collect. We are running these really high profile, insanely accurate sleep diagnostics that nobody else in the world has. Right? We have a custom build technology that no one else can see. We're running all this stuff. We've got toxicity screenings. We've got everything that are scientifically validated. And we're running this stuff. And then we're coming back and then we just sit down with my team and we just look at unbelievable amounts of data at the same time and really try to figure out what's happening to someone physiologically. And very often we can find a few things that are these big, what we call performance anchors. So these are things that are just dragging behind you. And a lot of them will fall into what we call either hidden or visible. So visible stressors are things like you're smoking, you're doing whatever stuff. You know it, you see it, you feel it, you know better. But the ones that are the most interesting are the hidden ones. So you don't even know that this is going on. You've got a slight copper deficiency. And all of a sudden, boom, we put that in there, and then everything just lights back up. You've
Really,
got
you
all
see huge shifts from just
totally massive. Yeah. It's not always quite that simple, but usually it can come down to like between 4 and 10 little items that we can correct fairly quickly. and then we just get out of the way of physiology. We let physiology return, and for the most part, it's like once these things are corrected, lifestyle and diet, basic hydration, sunlight, all that stuff, and you can just perform like a starship because you're just like nothing's in your way anymore. So that's the type of science I'm more interested in at this point, is being able to. The problem is those take tremendous amounts of funding.
Sure.
So it's like, hey, let's do this and let's look at, let's run a very advanced sleep diagnostics. Let's have somebody working through happiness and health and well-being and purpose. And let's have somebody on the team who can look at digestion, and we can do these. And let's have somebody look at all these aspects that go into performance, which is what I've been doing for years with our high-profile athletes. And now let's put science behind it. So that's the type of stuff I'm interested in doing when we come back. But it's just finding
funny for something that.
Yeah. So right now, the athletes are, when you're the number one player in the world and in one of these big sports,
Man,
we get to do that. So.
That's killer. That's killer. At least you're still getting to work with athletes. I'm glad to know that you're not. Of course, you're not. I don't know why my brain immediately was like, he's just been hanging out for 2 years. Like,
yeah, having kids.
No, of course you are, man. You're another lunatic just like me. I know that you're not sitting still. It just doesn't work well.
No, it's been really cool. Like the first decade of my career was, very much focused on science, and I've always worked with professional athletes. It's always been 6 or 8 at a time, but now being able to expand and just take on. We've got the number one player in the world in 3 of the 5 major sports in America. We've got this and so many other folks that are going through the system, and it's just we're just batting 1,000 right now. Everyone is just taking off. So it's been awesome.
So through that, and like through what you're seeing with all these athletes and data you're taking in, what are the kind of base deficiencies you're seeing? Is this something that we should all check and get blood work done to at least start getting some information, or?
Yeah, so this is that's a very good question, dude. How do I answer this without sounding terrible?
You're a scientist. You're allowed, I believe. I think.
I'll put it this way. I know this answer here, but you've had blood work done, correct?
Yeah, I get it done quarterly.
Yeah, okay. And most people at home, if I asked you, person at home, you'd say, yeah, I've had it done. And then my next question would be, okay, what have you ever done differently because of your blood work? So have you ever made any changes based on your blood work?
Yeah, I typically do every time.
Okay. The vast majority of folks are going to be like, well,
they didn't say anything was wrong. And I'm imagining that window of wrong per se. I don't know if wrong's the right term, but
bro, you're dead on. I know where you're going. You're dead on right. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So most people are going to take basic blood work. First of all, what they look for is simply insufficient. Then they're going to, whatever they see, they're going to go, hey, look, you're mostly in the reference range. We don't see any what we call clinical deficiencies. So you're not clinically deficient in vitamin A or vitamin K, or although they don't even measure those, but whatever the case may be, right? So you're good to go. Get more sleep. Right?
What a bummer, man. That's not the type of machine I'm trying to drive.
No. We're looking for things that are, first of all, we don't use reference range values because those are based on individuals in disease or in hospital. Not interested, right? So throw the reference ranges out the window. Number 2, we're looking at things behind the blood work. And so I'm not only looking at your sodium, potassium concentrations. I'm going to actually measure those against several other things that I can see and get inferences on. Ooh, that's actually giving me a sign that you've maybe got an infection or you've got some immunosuppression going on. Then from there, we're going to go confirm it. So, hey, I want you to go run this assay. I want you to go get this test done. Let's confirm it. Does that match up with what you're reporting subjectively? Does this match up? And we're going to link it across multiple platforms because none of these things are scientifically perfect. But if we're seeing some things in your blood and then we confirm it on a direct test, and then we're seeing you're having signs and symptoms of this, say, excessive amount of magnesium or whatever, then from there, we're going to go figure out why. Like vitamin D is a great example.
Yep, I just got my one of my bloods when that's what said I'm a little low on vitamin D, which doesn't surprise me. I'm not spending a ton of time outside. I need to be supplementing more of it anyway.
Maybe not.
Okay.
So this is exactly what I'm talking about. So layer 1 is identifying good analytics. Are you actually high or low in something? Number 2 then is figuring out why. And most people stop at number 1. Oh, you're low in vitamin D, take vitamin D. Now, before I go on this tirade, Vitamin D specifically is fairly benign. You can probably just pump it in, and it's very low harm. It's not going to cause, it's not a mineral. So minerals you have to be careful with because those will cause depletion of other minerals. You don't want to go messing with those. Vitamins, especially water soluble vitamins, but even vitamin D, it's pretty benign, right? So very low risk there. From a general population standpoint, I'm like, if you guys all want to just take 5,000 IU's vitamin D, fine.
Rock and roll.
If you're trying to optimize you, though, the next question is, why are you vitamin D? So now we're going to go to 2 questions. Are you spending enough time in direct sunlight and the right type of sunlight, all that stuff? If your answer is no, cool. Let's go do that.
Yep.
If the answer is actually, yeah, I do spend my 20 minutes a day in there. Interesting. Are you taking vitamin D? Yeah, I've been taking 10,000 IU's, or I've been getting a 25,000 IU shot every. Now this got way more interesting because if you're getting the sunlight, you're still low, and you've been supplementing, there has to be a very good reason why your body is keeping vitamin D low. Vitamin D is a storage molecule. This is why it's so effective. It keeps around. Well, if you are trying to excrete something, the body doesn't want excessive storage hormones kicking around. And so if you've got some sort of heavy metal toxicity or exposure that you're trying to get rid of, but then you're kicking yourself in a bunch of exogenous vitamin D, your body is going to continually suppress that value because it's trying to get rid of something. And so we want to figure out, like, whoa, before we start fighting the system here, in fact, we have, dude, I can't even tell you how many times we've raised people's vitamin D levels by taking them off vitamin D.
Huh. So taking too much of it could suppress, your body processing it?
No, what happens is, again, you're in this case, it's not always the case, but it can happen where you're trying to rid yourself of a lot of times it's heavy metal.
Okay.
And so you just get out of the way, let yourself clear the heavy metal, and then your endogenous levels just shoot right back up to where they want to be, because it was trying to keep you suppressed in that area so you could rid yourself of whatever the shit that you got going on. And so, like, this is how we get people actually, when you take full comprehension of everything going on, instead of just taking quick snapshots that, like the blood, you don't get run in false directions. And that's what we're trying to avoid is making, because the folks we work with, they don't have 6 months to wait and figure it out. Like,
right.
We got the masters in 4 months. Like, we got spring training kicking off. Like, I don't have time, bro. Like,
and this is just fully leaning into essentially like really control everything that you control.
yeah.
Recently I've started kind of updating my morning routine and being really, really strict on it, where I'm spending some time doing cardio in the morning, and then I am spending some time in the sauna, and then I'm hitting the cold tub before I start anything for the day. And for me, I know that it makes me some mysterious percentage better for the day. And from that point on, if it's something that I can be in 100% control of, and I have the opportunity to do it every day, and I'm not willing to do it, then how serious am I about wanting to be better?
Yep. So from our perspective, it's like, okay, do you want to unveil part of the equation, or do you want to just get rid of this shit? Just look at everything. Let's just stop playing and let's look at the entire picture, and then and we have people on our team. Like, I'm not an expert, pretty good at sleep, right? But I'm not the world's foremost expert in neurophysiology. So we have folks that we bring, okay, like, this is a particular case, we're seeing flags here. What's your interpretation? We run full PSD sleep studies. We don't use our ring and none of that bullshit. We're sending full sleep studies to people's. We're coming in, we're running full diagnostics on airflow, humidity, CO2 cloud, which is the CO2 that you breathe out during the night. It floats around your face. And then if you inhale the CO2, you shoot back up. We're running full diagnostics on that. We're looking at volatile organics that are things coming out from your mattress. We're looking at melanopic lux, wavelength types, all in your bedroom. So it's the exact same thing, right? Like, we're not only looking at a crappy diagnostic, we go, how are you sleeping? Fine. Well, we're doing a full PSD for that. We're doing full EEGs. We're sending out full systems to your house. Like, we're not putting a $200 ring on. But then I want to know why. Why are you having these things, these episodes? It's not just enough to understand that you didn't sleep great and your deep sleep and REM is whatever here. It is here. And we're not just throwing you random melatonin, because that just, like, I can't tell you how many problems we've had with people taking melatonin.
Sure.
Just 100x levels of melatonin in their blood the next day.
Even right. That's not currently the issue, right? You're putting a Band-Aid on something that's a problem of something you're doing on the front end.
Totally. So is it environmental? Is it physiological. So we're looking at melatonin, dopamine, serotonin levels. We're taking these things, cortisol curves throughout the night, all these things. So is it environmental? Is it physiological? Or is it psychological? And if it's one of those things, then it's okay. Now we're going to a therapist, a psychologist, someone like that to work on that, because that's what's actually causing this cortisol curve. Or is there something going on in your gut? We know that there's some indication that things like a number of gut bugs actually kind of wake up at night. And so they cause all kinds of problems if you've got something on in your gut right before you go to bed.
Well, in gut biome is its whole other world that doesn't honestly get that discussed much, especially not to people not interested in chasing performance.
Yeah.
Before we get back to that, now with these top performers in these different fields you're working on, I was wondering if there's been anything that you've seen that you were surprised by in blood work that kind of connects high performers that you're like, oh, well, that's a fascinating.
That's a really good question, dude. I don't think so.
Okay.
And here's why. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of men, but maybe more females. And I've worked in aerobic sports, anaerobic sports, powerlifting, weightlifting, Olympians, wrestling, UFC boxers, um, Olympic marathoners. And I would say that we simply see more variation just from human to human than we see categorically. And so to me, the individual matters more than the category. It matters more than the sport or the sex. So we haven't seen patterns other than like the very sex specific patterns with luteinizing hormone and progesterone,
Sure.
like,
Right.
things like that. Not really, man. Like if we see somebody who has like a high quality diet and somebody versus a low quality diet, it's not like, well, the high quality ones always have sufficient micronutrients, but the other ones are well, some of them have great gut health and some of them are just terrible. Some of them blood looks okay, but their immunoprofiles are off. Some of them flag for the toxicity
Just
stuff.
basically unpredictable.
It's human, man. It's just like each human is their own unique human, and we don't see categories of like, oh, you got a golfer, okay, watch for A, B, C, and D. Like,
What
no,
about
man, I can't
any?
think of anything.
What about any differences? I mean, if mostly working with female athletes, this was something that really I'd got kind of turned on to with my partner Bonnie, um, as she was interested coming off of birth control and working
Uh-huh.
with a doctor to work on hormones. And her doctor's like, look, this is going to take a long. We've chemically
Totally,
castrated you for 20 years.
totally.
And like,
Yeah,
is that something you see a huge performance?
this is probably of the last 5 years. I would say this is by far the biggest universal thing we're seeing from women. And I actually said this maybe a decade ago. I was like, we're going to look back on birth control and be like,
Yeah, it's real weird, man.
oops, sorry.
And just the fact that we were like, they'll handle it as far as women
Just
go.
girls, they'll figure it
Oh
out.
man, like there's
Just
no
these silly
other
girls and their
option.
hormones. Yeah.
Oof.
No, I would say we deal with that. Hey, so here's the problem, man. Like, sounds like you're a little bit up to speed, guys. Most, if you're listening, you probably have no idea what we're really saying. But for some women, it's fairly benign, right?
Okay.
It's a fairly easy transition. But most, it is not, and some of them, it is straight up like, before I got on this birth control, I was crazy town, and I like my brain was a different person, and now like I'm not, and I don't want to go back to that person again. Like I don't want to live, just these felt like I was bipolar.
Right.
Uh, and when you hear that, you're like, man, like what are that's just so tragic of having to deal with just complete like crying uncontrollably, not even knowing why, and then the next day just being hysterical the whole day, right?
Yeah, that was
So
something we were really worried about with Bonnie because I guess when she was trying to figure out birth control at a much younger point in her life, um, really had this ugly depression and stuff like that
oh,
for quite some time. And so whenever she made this decision a couple years ago, or not, yeah, probably a year and a half ago to start that plan, um, there's more reasons behind why we wanted to get
Yeah,
off
yeah, yeah.
birth control from other reasons too, but that being one of them. Like, why would we continue to take this thing? We don't have an interest in wanting kids. We have other options for contraception. Uh,
Mhm.
and seeing, there was a big fear in her of like, "Well, I can't go back to feeling like that." And
Yep.
we worked really hard with, I mean, the amount of vitamin and other stuff that she's been taking, working with, a endocrinologist and a doctor who does this, as well as blood work, has really made the transition nice. But we've seen some really big differences, like hair growth and other stuff like that coming back. And
Yeah, the two parts that I love the most about what you just said is number one, this is a transformation. This is not I take like you take testosterone tomorrow. Like it's pretty overnight. Not literally, but
yeah,
like
no, my shit's easy, dude.
number
It's so
two,
ridiculously easy to
this
manage.
is a 1 year plan. Like this is, and that's what you said. Like this is our plan, and that's what you have to have. So anyone listening, like you really have to work with somebody for a long time, and you have to commit to that process because it's not. As much as I feel confident, and as much as we've dealt with this, every single time I have a woman that goes through this, I'm like, hey, I'm making no promises.
Right.
This might take us 7, 8 months to really get you figured out, and it's gonna. The analogy I say is, it's like putting your finger in a pool, right? When you do this, it don't just cause ripples around your finger; it causes ripples throughout the entire thing. And what might happen is when the ripples hit the edge of the pool, it's gonna splash up,
And then they
and then it's gonna
reverberate.
crash down. And like this is what's gonna. We have to wait for that whole thing to up and oscillate until it then settles in. And we may realize halfway through that tidal wave just got bigger. Okay, back. It's just very difficult. So it is possible if you work with somebody. They really have to know what they're doing, and they have to really care and take high quality care of you. And then you
I mean,
just gotta
they've
go
treated
for
it
it.
the same way like you're talking about with these top athletes that you are. I mean, she's answering questions about every single detail of her life to get as much data as they possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when girls are like, I'm 27 years old and like I don't even think about sex ever.
Right.
You're like,
That's
yeah, like I don't want to.
something
We don't
else
want
is
to
in
talk
the
about that.
works.
Yeah, it's like I know because you're chemically like you're
Chemically
of course like
castrated.
we know what progesterone and estradiol and these things do for your sex drive. And when you automate those, like what it
And
sucks, man. It's hard.
how standard is that globally? Like, or is that pretty much just in more modern westernized culture that female birth control contraception is the one and only basically method?
I can't speak to that, man. I don't really know.
I don't either. I
I
don't
just
know
know
what
what we
the
do
UK
here.
does. I don't know if that's pretty much just globally accepted. I can
Yeah,
imagine there's places that aren't, but
yeah. And it's this is to be really clear. This is not, and you're not saying this either. This is not demonizing birth control for any reasons because it can be a true life changer for a lot of women.
100%. Look, I am not a pro or con. I want options and information about everything. I'm
Totally.
super fucking bummed that I had to figure out on my own how helpful cannabis and psychedelics and things like that would be for
Yeah.
me to find ambition and growth and, want to find my own shit to sort out. And I'm
Mhm.
really bummed out that we aren't still studying and doing more of that as an option for people outside of just pharmaceuticals.
But how awesome is it that that's changing now?
Dude, it is a changing and I'm stoked on it.
Isn't it great?
Makes me really happy.
I'm from the Northwest, so I grew up in Washington, right? And I went to college in Oregon. And my folks are logging folks, like born and raised in little logging towns and classic white hunters, you know, this type of shit. And like similar to your folks, just backcountry,
Yep.
different kind of backcountry, right? Um,
Also
and when
just grew up in
Oregon
a way different world, man.
and when Oregon started passing these laws, my dad's just like, I like he can't comprehend. I'm like, no, trust me, dad. Like,
This is okay.
yeah, and then you have to like walk him through it, and he's just like, oh, really, really? Because like they still just associate psychedelics with
Well, the
all the propaganda from
propaganda,
the 60s.
which
Yeah,
is such a bummer, right?
such a bummer.
God damn, man, the amount of propaganda the amount of time and money and energy and arrest that were done in this country over non-dangerous things.
Yep. Like to me, this was again, I don't I've never been against marijuana. It's just not like a personal thing for me. I don't
Yeah,
really have
right
an
on.
interest in it. Fine, no worries, right? But when you start looking at that, and when you started looking at the psychedelic stuff, same thing, right? I'm not I actually think it's I'll go as far as to say I don't think it's good to have to do ayahuasca every month. right? Like
I
this
don't
is a
believe it's good to do ayahuasca every month either.
this is a
I
problem.
think it's a tool.
If you've done it 55 times in your life, like I'm with. Having said that, when you started looking at some of the stuff, when this first started popping on my radar, like I don't know, 7 years ago,
Mhm.
I was like, "Yep, this makes total sense." And everyone was like, "What?" I'm like, "No, no, this makes complete sense." I thought CBD made less sense actually,
It's
but
such a, but it's a gateway. Like the
totally,
CBD thing to me is everyone's safety net of dipping their toe into the pond to say
yep,
plant something could be beneficial. Look,
yeah,
I think CBD is great, but I don't think it works worth the
yeah,
fuck without the entourage effect of THC and some
yeah,
dose with it.
yeah. I've grown more warm on CBD and with a few specific companies, but for the most part, like psychedelics, like that made way more sense. I talked about that to move forward. I've actually had a few proposals come through our lab of like, hey, would you be interested in doing psychedelic stuff on human performance?
Ooh,
Um,
let
and
me
I'm
know if you
actually
need any research. I'm down.
I, I'm open to it. It's it's just like, boy, how do we fund this?
Well, in my experience, man, psychedelics are one of the only things, and still probably one of the only things that I get a complete pain relief from.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, if I even microdosing, I get some type of a pain relief
Yeah.
with psilocybin. But if I take a big dose and I'm doing some work that day,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, I'm at a zero,
Yeah.
which is never the case. And so, like now having this tool that I look at of, once or so a month, being able to take a day to get an actual vacation from my head dealing with any amount of pain is
Yep.
really nice. And I
Yep.
treat it that way of like, yo, let's just have a full break.
Yep. Yeah. And there's other, I think the other more, not more, but the thing that is also interesting to me about psychedelics is the opportunity to pattern break. So you see these loops created with individuals. You just can't break those things hard, other than just walking completely away from consciousness for a minute. And you
Mm,
do that, and there's so many now reports of like, okay, um, whatever the thing is, patterning in your brain, and now you can cut from that, and people can just come back from the task. And for years, decades, that was hippie talk. Oh yeah,
yep.
yeah, great. Like, and I could tell you 1,000 examples of people who say things like this, and I'm like, you don't understand anecdote, do you?
Right.
Like,
Right. These aren't science facts.
yes, like, yeah, I know your friend got really, really high, and like, I actually, a mutual friend of ours, who I won't name, I remember years ago, I think we were in Austin, surprising enough, right?
Fair. That's fair.
And we were at a dinner, and this guy was like, "Oh yeah, I was an introvert my entire life. I was a dork, blah 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 blah." And then I did, what's the African one?
Boga?
Iboga.
Yep.
And the next day, it totally rewired my brain. It changed how all my neurons were firing. And now he's this like super eccentric, outgoing, like party guy, blah blah blah. And I'm like,
It didn't
okay,
do
first of
that.
all, you cannot rewire your brain by one session of iboga. Like the like clearly that has a fairly clear explanation of what happened to that individual. But my friend
Yeah,
was just like,
it's
"Oh,
interesting, right?
did you
Yeah.
hear that? Blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "Stop, bro! Like you have a scientific background.
Anecdotal.
Like you gotta like."
Yeah.
And he just couldn't get past it and couldn't get past it. He was like, "Oh yeah, yeah." So like, you got to be able
And
to
I get
like
the allure of it. And I get the allure of
totally.
it. And even with myself, I've come in and out of times of wanting to, I don't know, I'm more drawn to it and less drawn to it, and might treat it as such. Uh, but it's for sure been a really, really interesting tool for me. And I hope that we're able to do more and more studies on it and actually figure out what's going on and how it can help people with, man, some of the magic that is the brain.
Yeah, this is. I think the next valley that psychedelics have to cross is where do we go from. I'll put it this way: when you take a normal drug, SSRI or something like that, you've got a very short half life, and you've got effectiveness within the hours to days, right? So this is super transient. The nice part about psychedelics is that transient period is extended from probably a few hours or days to like weeks.
Mm,
Um, you see people who very depending on what they do, right? You can do a single dose of psychedelics and have a very pronounced effect for weeks to months. The problem is a lot of times it
integration.
falls. it falls back, right? So where do we get that integration piece where it's like, we don't need to be doing psychedelics quarterly
No,
or
you need
something
to
more than that, right?
change. Right.
Totally.
This is going back to the stop taking melatonin to fix your sleep. Figure out why you're not fucking sleeping.
Bingo.
And then
And
same
if you,
same answer is if you're trying to treat whatever your thing is with psychedelics without figuring out the root cause,
yeah,
then that of course that's a mistake, and you're going to fall back into the old habits.
yep. To me, like the psychedelics, the biggest potential impact is with the folks who are very little to no drug use and very little to no believe and buy in cognitive behavioral therapy or anything, right? And it's like, let me smack you in the face and show you the possibilities. You know,
Yes.
oh shit.
Yep.
Now I'm bought. That to me, not like the I've been smoking weed my whole life, drugs. Like, okay, it's like you're probably gonna be like, that was dope and cool, and then you're just gonna have to keep. But it's the people who are just have never seen, felt, experienced anything like this, and you hit them with like a, oh my god, this is consciousness out here.
Right.
This is what my life could be like. Yes, now let's start walking through restructuring lifestyle and whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I
Yeah,
think
and figuring out how to sort out your own bullshit that's been hanging you up and creating other.
that's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it's
Right.
showing you the possibility that that is something that can be resolved. So
Yep. Yeah. If it can
anyway,
go away temporarily, you know, you got to find the roots. I guess as we're kind of wrapping things up, man, like as far as what you've seen, what would you consider to just be simple, valuable supplementation that you guys implement like almost globally? Like these are going to be things that will actually increase performance in strength and cognitive behavior or endurance.
so my honest answer is none.
None. All right.
So I can give you a better answer though. Because but my true one is that is we don't give out anybody the same milieu of, you know, powerful five or your whatever.
Sure.
And the honest answer is, I don't know, probably 90% do get the same handful.
Right.
So we can talk about that. Creatine, as boring as that is, I'm just like it's a mountain in terms of effectiveness, safety, and how ubiquitous.
Especially
I was
with CTE, just creatine has been a positive help forever. Don't we see studies now with Alzheimer's or anything else as well?
Yeah, there's a ton. Actually, what's probably most interesting coming down the pike is folks have now started to hear about the gut microbiome, but a lot of people don't understand about the brain microbiome. And so there's strong potential, and I'd say heavy on potential at this point, very heavy on potential, that things like creatine are beneficial to the brain microbiome. And so not only is it powering astrocytes and things like this metabolically, um, the applications for chronic neurological diseases like Huntington's and Alzheimer's and like maybe there, but for the other stuff, it's very, very clearly a benefit and has almost no downside. Unlike vitamins or more specifically minerals or any hormone, it doesn't have at this point any potential counter effects. So it doesn't downregulate magnesium synthesis or excrete calcium storage. Like most other supplements, you're going to pay the price one way or the other. Right. And what we always say, there's no free pass in physiology,
Sure.
meaning everything you take does something. Creatine has so much benefit and has very little things. It is the closest to free pass we have ever found.
It's also cheap.
Super cheap.
Quality of it is super
It's
easy to get just basically from anywhere.
almost identical across the board.
And why it's not publicized more than it is because it works and it's cheap.
Boring.
Yep, it's boring.
A very solid multivitamin. Of course, men be aware of multivitamins with iron if you haven't had that checked, because we have seen this a number of times. Of, in fact, that there's some evidence now coming from the cell culture world, and we haven't seen this in humans yet, but it hasn't been done, of linking things like iron, um, excessive iron in the blood to things like candida and other bacterial and yeast overgrowth in the gut. And so it's very, very potential. Again, just cell culture at this point, where having too much iron floating around allows for other infections to come in and then persist and then cause kind of other things. And I would say that the men that we see coming in that have a lot of iron in their blood, there's a very strong tie there to they got other problems too.
Okay.
So you want to be careful of that, depending on your diet, especially. But a multivitamin is, you know, it just comes a little bit of vitamin A, a little bit of vitamin C, and little bit of vitamin D usually, and some things like that. Pretty ubiquitous across the board. Those are our two kind of power ones. If you're into performance space, some sort of acid blocker, so whether this is beta alanine or sodium bicarbonate, that's a common thing that's going to go in many of our athletes' cocktails. Same thing with creatine, very low, no side effects, fairly transient, and has a very strong performance enhancing benefit, especially for anything moderate endurance based. So anything glycolytic, anything where you get real high, quote unquote acid. Either of those two, beta alanine or sodium bicarbonate, very, very well demonstrated, very cheap, very easy to get. A lot of different ways to go about those. So those are probably the most common ones. Vitamin C is, especially at like a moderately low dose, 500 milligrams, is pretty easy to get away with. You want to be very careful of going. I mean, it's water soluble, right? So again, it's going to pass through if you don't use a lot of it. But you start getting high on any antioxidant, you're playing a game now, because oxidation and stress and inflammation, I mean, I know you know this, but that stuff is critically important. There are no adaptations without inflammation. There is no healing without oxidative stress. So if you just bury and suppress all your oxidation and that side of the equation, which we typically think of as bad, if you smash that all over the floor, then you're never going to get better. You're never going to heal. So you want to be very careful of doing those things. So vitamin C is like at a small dose I'm okay with, but I don't just like tossing it out. I don't like giving supplements to anybody unless I have a reason.
Right, unless you're getting a chance to look at their blood work and figure out actually where we can help.
And I'm not even going to do just like a basic blood panel. I don't want to hand out micronutrients unless we've done a full micronutrient panel, unless you've had them fully assessed, because you just don't know what's going on. Unless we've looked at an entire immune array and we've looked at all your interleukins and stuff, and we don't know what's driving that stuff. I don't like handing that stuff.
I mean, I guess easy question is, has anyone you've worked with, you've looked at their stuff and been like, nothing to change?
No, but there are still plenty that I've gone like, there's not enough here for you to make a huge change if it's a big pain in the ass for you.
Yeah, we're just dialing. And that's what peak performance athletes want, is we all know we're chasing half percentages and 1% anywhere we can. They all add up.
Yep. So
especially if you're telling me, especially if you're telling me that I can sneak off whatever minuscule percentage by simply putting something in my mouth. This is the easiest thing an athlete could ever hear.
Yeah, basically.
Like, I don't have to run more. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Man, I was looking through everything, and I saw you're talking more and more about anti-aging.
Yeah.
Anything critical there that, and I realized I just threw a giant topic at you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we're wrapping up. Anything left to say?
Yeah, sorry, man. Like, tell you what, we'll do this again. We'll do anti-aging and do another podcast. I need to have you back on more often and go over this. I had a supplement that I've recently got turned on and started taking meldronium. It's a Russian, supposed to help with endurance. I've decided to play with it. I'm going to find out and see if it.
Do you know what the active ingredient is? Do you know what it actually is?
I don't. I will text it to you.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I will find out if I want to continue taking it, and I will let people know going forward.
The one thing I'll warn you on here. I won't warn you because that's awesome. Go for it.
Yeah. Right.
I don't care.
I'm aware of my risk. I'm totally down to manipulate the machine.
No way is that going to be the worst thing that you've ever put in your mouth.
Not even close. Not even probably today.
The one caution I will send out to folks, though, who are less educated, who aren't doing their due diligence. I mean, this is a part of your life, right? You take that stuff very seriously, and this is a part of your ethos, right?
And I keep the other variables very, very fucking controlled.
Totally. Like, this is what your passion is. This is part of your business. This is the core of you. So you're going to take metrics on it. You're going to control, like, all these things. You're going to pay attention. Other folks just like buy some shit, throw it in their mouth, and go about the day. You got to be careful, because we've seen now reports of vitamin D, with melatonin, where the active ingredient in the actual supplement can range from 1 to 1000x the dosage on the bottle. So if you think you're taking 5,000 IUs of vitamin D, I forgot this step in our calculus, is, okay, you've been taking 5,000 IUs of vitamin D and it hasn't gone up, etc. Is this the toxicity thing? Or probably most likely, the most likely scenario is there's not actually 5,000 IUs in that pill. So we
Right.
need who's making this thing. Will they give us the lab specs on that actual um, uh, bunch? Like, I'm losing the term, but like that actual product, um, not just like in general, but that actual palette of the
Right.
companies like Thorne do that. It's why I like them.
Yeah, they're great.
If your supplement company is not third party certified, I know most people think of that as like, oh, it's just for athletes. Well, yes and no, but you want to guarantee when you're taking 5,000 IUs of vitamin D, at least it's in the same stratosphere as 5,000. And these reports have shown it could be, again, 10 to 100 to 1,000x the dosages. And this is why we've seen people that they wake up in the morning and we check their melatonin in the morning and the afternoon, and they're still at 50 to 125x the upper range limit of melatonin. And melatonin is supposed to have like a 60 to 90 minute half-life, right? So it should be gone there.
Not 8 hours or 10 hours.
Yeah. Well, when I'm just taking a moderate dose, 5 milligrams, which is not even high, right? You could take 10 and people wouldn't think you're crazy. And they're just walking around with these, not double, not triple, 10, 100x upper range limit. It's like you're walking around sedated. So what do these people do? Every single one of these people we found this in are stimulant junkies. Because you feel like shit, you're sedated all day.
Yep.
Stimulants, how's your energy? All of them report pretty awesome to pretty good energy throughout the day. So on their subjective questionnaires, you're like, no, I feel good, I feel okay. Like, well, what happens if we take you down from 28 grams of caffeine a day? Oh, now what happens? Now those energy levels are like you just Amazon. Yeah, you're sedated, bro. So then you're in the cycle. Then you can't go to sleep at night. So what do?
Take more drugs.
More drugs. And we just end up in this cycle. So
hey man, more drugs to fix your drugs. That's
so just be careful when you start taking supplements. You want to know what's actually in the supplement you're taking. Because it can have like, I mean, we're not talking pharmaceuticals, right? So it's not like you're going to go to kidney failure in a week, but it can put you in these little spirals of lifestyle where you're just like, man, kind of sleeping like shit and blah, 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 blah.
Oh, the spiral of lifestyle too is what will end up getting you to the other thing.
100% it will.
And you're chasing stuff that you could have fixed with lifestyle adjustments.
That's correct.
Man, Andy, I appreciate it a ton. One of the other things I saw on your page that I'm stoked that you're sharing is just that, again, exercise performed better for emotional well-being than anything else, continuing on and successful again forever as it always has. I hope more people fucking get an idea that you can sort some things out if you're just willing to take the wheel at your life and go do things. So where can everyone find all your stuff, man? If people want to fund, if people want to help, if there's Patreon, everything.
Yeah. Okay. So, Instagram and Twitter are the easiest place to follow along. I basically just put out science on those things. So you can do that. My YouTube page is entirely dedicated to all my educational content. So hypertrophy stuff and hydration stuff and nutrition, exercise training. It's all the way from the basics to the latest breaking science on muscle physiology to, how do I start a strength training program? It's all my classes basically at the university at the senior graduate level are up on YouTube, in various 5-minute, 25 and like 3-hour forms. So if you want to dive in there, I do have a Patreon page. I pay this basically undergrad to edit them and put them up and do all this stuff. And he's graduating now, but the Patreon money just goes to him. So the more support we get there, the better quality editing and more functions and all that cool stuff where you have like timestamps now. And I want to do that next so that people can see an hour video and be like, oh, I want to know that part on fiber, go right to there, or like whatever the thing is.
So much effort.
Yeah. So instead of sifting through a 2-hour
it's so much effort to try to get all the information out in the neatest, most accessible way for the shortest attention span on earth we have.
Yeah, it is. So that's all up there. And then if you want to donate to the lab, just contact me. That's the easiest way to go. And then if any folks need to take a deeper dive physiology wise and you really want to head into these full comprehensive labs, it is not for the faint of heart. It is what we collect a lot of your body fluids, and it is a 30-day process, and you're just getting hammered for 30 straight days, and we're taking shit and measuring shit literally.
Yeah.
and other stuff. Not for the faint of heart, and not in just based on how comprehensive and time intensive it is, it's not cheap. So this is not the $400 stool test that your functional medicine guy gave you. It's we go straight to answers, so we can always have that conversation for the folks that are really interested.
Right on. Brother, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Before you go, Boot, I got to tell you, and I mean this in all sincerity, I do a ton of podcasts. I gotta say, man, you probably asked 3 to 5 of the best questions I've been asked in a long, long, long time today.
Hell yeah.
So,
What were those questions now that I can?
the one that jumped out the most was the one about when we started the birth control conversation. And then the other one you asked me, I was like, ooh, dude, that's a really good question. And I forgot what it was now.
What would you
And then there's
study?
another one. That one too, but then there was another one, just really insightful one that I just say you're on it, man. Like, I don't know what you did this morning, your routine, but that
Awesome.
was much more pleasurable than most. So
Andy, I really appreciate it, dude. I appreciate
yeah,
it.
man.
Trying to, this is one of those things. I enjoy podcasting, and I really try to take some time to look at it myself and realize where I could be fucking better at it.
Yeah.
I think it's a skill to improve on, unless I'm just going to hold conversations with people and shoot the shit, or are we trying to do something?
Man, I gotta say too, I don't remember how many years it's been since we did the first one, and not that one was fun too, but this, like, you're so much better.
Thank you.
So much better.
A lot of reps. Seems to
man.
be that's the only thing that makes any difference in life is a bunch of reps.
For sure. All right, brother.
Brother, I appreciate it. Enjoy your day. Have a great one.
Yep. Peace out.